Rimmer of Rock Island High School football. He's also a coach for Team USA for the second episode of Beyond the Cut. Welcome, man. Appreciate you coming in.
I appreciate the haircut on Wednesday night.
So I guess to kind of start so people kind of know where you came from, how did you kind of, obviously I'm assuming being a football coach, you grew up playing football?
Yep, yeah, so I grew up in the game. Actually, when I was really young, it's something that we both share. I started off in soccer was kind of my main deal.
That's the better sport.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but so soccer was my main deal for a long time. And then I kind of went through a growth spurt and decided to try football and liked it and fell in love with the diversity of it and how it can help everybody. Not to say that every sport or organized activity can't do that, but it was what worked for me and what I liked doing, and did it in high school and continued to play in college. And
At what point was it that you kind of started to make that shift of, like, okay, I'm a college football player, I want to go into coaching? Like, because obviously every football player's dream is to go pro. At what point, obviously, did you kind of realize, like, that's probably not going to happen? What do I want to do? And you kind of, like, how did you land on coaching?
So I figured out that I wasn't going to go pro when we're actually the same age, and he got drafted like 4th overall by the Jets. But I met DeBrickshaw Ferguson, and when he shook my hand, right then I knew that pro football wasn't going to be something for me. And actually, before I knew I was going to coach, I decided I was going to teach. So when I first went to college, I wanted to be a doctor, and I got a 16% on my first test. And then so I went to like my counselor and asked, hey, what could I do where I could help people and kind of give back? And they suggested teaching. And so social studies and PE were the easiest teaching degree to get, and then coaching kind of fell in with it. And I got hired my first year out of school by a guy that I consider my mentor. He's at Peoria High School now in Peoria, but at the time he was at Woodruff High School. Went to work with him and fell in love with it and decided that that's what I wanted to do.
Because that's where you're from originally, right? Peoria?
Yep. So I went to Richwoods. I went there to interview for a teaching and coaching job. And the coach asked me to volunteer. And so me being like the young, hot-headed guy that I was, some of my players will watch this and laugh because they think I'm still hot-headed, but I've chilled out a lot. He didn't hire me, so naturally the place I tried to go was the first place that I thought that we could beat them. We didn't beat them. Then they closed the school, and then I moved out to North Carolina for
I was going to say, when I met
8 years.
You just moved back from North Carolina, right?
Right. So I moved out there when they closed the school just because it was hard to find jobs in Illinois. It was during the housing market boom. Went out there and worked for a guy, Chris Metzger, at a really big school, and kind of went to head coaching university for 5 years. He's super high energy, organized guy, and went and worked for him, and then got my first head job, and then the Rock Island job opened up, and they called me about coming to interview, and the rest is kind of history.
How did you get involved with Team USA?
So the guy I worked for in North Carolina, he was a head coach for them, and he asked me to be an assistant coach. Long story short, I went and did that and enjoyed it, had a great time, and I don't have a family or anything like that, and football is what I like to do. So from then on, every time somebody from USA called and asked me to do something, I just never said no and kind of rose up through the ranks. And
what position are you with Team USA now as far as, like,
so we're kind of in our off season right now because we're in the middle of the high school season. But the last time when we were active, which now was before COVID, I was the head coach of the under-16 team.
Oh, okay. Have you had any, like, big-time players, like, in the college ranks or anything like that come through? Or?
So in 2019, it was International Bowl 11, I believe. And we've had a lot of big names. Teran Mathieu, Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, who's starting for the quarterbacks.
Jameis Winston to eat the W celebration, was that you?
No. I didn't coach him. He's just been through our program. Probably the biggest name that I've gotten to coach, he starts on the defensive line for Georgia right now, Nolan Smith, and he is an incredible player.
Georgia's got, like, the best defense ever, right?
Specifically, their defensive line is incredible. Nolan actually played on the eighth grade team and was so dominant that other countries couldn't like get handoffs off. So we moved him from the eighth grade team up to the U16 team, and he was the MVP of the game as an eighth grader.
It doesn't surprise me the way that Georgia defensive line is playing.
Yeah.
I think you've told me also, didn't you coach the guy I feel like should be the quarterback for the Hawkeyes right now, Hogan?
Yeah, so again, I didn't coach him,
Okay.
but he was in our program. I've been at practices and stuff with him, and
That dude's got to be able to do something better than Petrus.
he's the thing that the guys who worked with Hogan always said about him, as great as his arm was, and he's a big, tall, strong dude, is that he's a really good leader and commands a lot of presence, and guys like him.
That's one of the main reasons. Like, obviously, we haven't seen him on the field, but one of the main reasons that I kind of want to see what he can do is obviously I don't think Petrus is the solution at that position. But I remember when all of the scandal or whatever you want to call it at Iowa broke, when James Daniels came out and kind of said, like, this is what's happening behind the scenes at the Iowa football program. I feel like you guys should know about it. I remember one of the writers, I forget who it was, released a text message thread. This was still when he was a recruit, where Deuce Hogan had put like a group chat of every Iowa recruit for that year. And essentially in the group text was like, hey guys, like, I can't say I know what you're experiencing, obviously, because I don't experience that, but I want to be there for you guys. I want to learn more about this, and I want to be the group at Iowa that changes the culture. And seeing I don't know if he was 17, 18, whatever at the time, but to see a response like that, a mature response from someone like that, it was like, okay, this dude's definitely a leader. I don't know if he can throw a football, but he's definitely a leader. And I feel like, obviously, you're a football coach. You know more about it than I do, but I feel like that's one of the bigger aspects of being a quarterback is you have to be a leader. If people don't look at you as a leader, they're probably not going to follow you as far as when you're talking in the huddle and saying all that type of stuff. If they don't respect you and see you as a leader, I'm sure it makes it a little bit more difficult.
Right. I actually think that the arm talent of a quarterback until you get to the super elite level, like the D1, and then the NFL, I think it's like the most overrated aspect. The way that you carry yourself, your body language, how much your teammates respect you, and the way you manage a game and the decisions you make in a game are all way more important than how far you can throw a ball and how accurate you can throw a ball.
I mean, a lot of it is scheme, too. I mean, look at the end of his career, Drew Brees. He couldn't throw a ball 40, 50 yards down the field, but quick screens, quick slants, all that type of stuff, you can still be an effective quarterback, and Drew Brees had the leadership, obviously. That's one of the things that people always talk about was the leadership that he had and commanded.
Yeah, he is also, when it comes to arm talent, that's an accurate dude, and he makes really sound decisions, too.
I guess to kind of touch back a little bit on something we just brought up, that when the Iowa scandal kind of broke, obviously the barbershop world, I feel like, is somewhat similar to the football world as far as on a daily basis I see people from all different race, religion, someone that just fresh out of jail, they're a lawyer, like it's kind of all over the place of who I see and interact with on a daily basis. And essentially it's kind of the same thing from a football standpoint as far as you've got all different people of like social standing, race, religion, all that type of stuff, and it's a melting pot on a football team. And anyone that you talk to that has played football for a long time, they always talk about when they're done, that's what they miss the most, is that you can have a country boy and a guy that's from the inner city, and they're going to get along for that purpose. What do you kind of feel like helps with that, kind of make that the melting pot where you don't really see the same issues that you're seeing talked about like on social media and that type of stuff?
Well, the biggest thing is first how diverse the sport of football itself is, right? Like you've got to have 300-pound linemen, you've got to have kids who can fly, you've got to have someone who can throw the ball, you've got to have someone who can tackle, and then that lends itself to the locker room being diverse having people of different religions, nationalities, styles, political backgrounds, all of it. And then you combine all of these people who are so different, and they've got to work together towards a common goal. And often that allows those kids, adults, coaches, whoever that are very diverse to not necessarily put their beliefs aside. We talk about it a lot at Rock Island, like be you, be who you are, but at the same time, put energy and put effort towards achieving this common goal. And I think through that process, you you kind of experience where other people come from, and at the same time understand that like it's okay for me and you to be different, look different, talk different, believe different, and still be able to work towards this common goal. And that's really what makes, I believe, a football locker room special, maybe even compared to some other sports.
Definitely. I feel like football kind of bonds people a little bit more just because of the sheer brutality of the sport. As far as, I mean, obviously, I was a soccer player growing up. I feel like soccer players get a bad rap, and I mean, obviously, when you watch some of these games and you see people flopping and stuff, it makes it look like it's not that difficult of a sport. And trust me, I get as annoyed as anyone with some of these flops, but they also get foul called, so it's kind of hard to blame them. But I mean, there's no question. Like, people can question a soccer player all you want. Like, going out and having the cardio to play a full soccer game, I don't think people really understand what that takes. But as far as physicality, yeah, we're not getting slammed on every play. Where football, it doesn't matter. You're going to take some hits and you're going to take some shots, and everyone on the team can kind of bond with that.
Or like identify with that.
Yeah, exactly. Your hell days. Everyone goes through that
Well,
same thing.
and that's the part that I was going to mention that kind of for the bringing the team together, establishing the culture of the team for that year, the bonding. Like in football, another thing that's different than a lot of other sports is the opportunities that you get to play, right? Basketball, you play 2 or 3 times a week. Soccer, you play 2 or 3 times a week. Baseball, you play 2 or 3 times a week. There's not too many sports that you really only get one opportunity to perform and do the fun part of it. I mean, in high school in Illinois, you play 9 games, and we lift weights, we run, we prepare, we eat, we sleep, make all the sacrifices year round, and everybody in that locker room, no matter how they look, what they believe, what color their skin is, what religion they are, they all know what it's like. I mean, I love the sport more than a whole lot of things, but there's not a lot of, I mean, most people have thought about quitting. Everybody hurts, everybody bleeds, everybody sweats, and so everybody understands what that sacrifice is like, and that creates a common identity for your team right there.
How has, with the way 2020 went and 2020 started, and obviously we had the George Floyd thing, and before that, obviously, there's just story after story of stuff like that going on. But as a white guy that's in charge of a football team that has a very diverse football team, what has kind of been, I guess, your approach on handling those situations? Because obviously you're in a position that, kind of like me, where you see that stuff from a different perspective because you're surrounded by it all the time, but you also haven't lived that life type of thing. So as far as like how have you had any players kind of come up and talk to you about that type of stuff? Do you kind of just leave it up to your players that like, hey, if you want to talk about this stuff, we can talk about it? Like, especially when everything went down at Iowa, that's so close to you. I'm sure that there was probably some people having conversations and stuff. How did that kind of affect you guys?
So during, I mean, everything that went down at Iowa, the summer social justice movement, the tragedies in Minnesota, George Floyd, a lot of different things. We were actually shut down and doing a lot of things through Zoom, whether they were football specific or not. And I think the biggest thing that we kind of try to tell our kids, and some of them are going to say I'm crazy when I go through this because practice time is practice time, and when we get distracted, sometimes I get upset. But as long as we're not at practice, not in the weight room, that there's an open door policy, right? If you're uneasy about something or something doesn't make you feel right, whether it's coming to talk to a coach or asking a coach to find you someone to talk to, that's kind of the way we tried to handle it. And then me, myself, during the pandemic, I guess you would say, because that's what the stretch of time was, I really tried to change the way I approach things with empathy.
Yep.
No matter, again, I feel like I've said it a million times, no matter how you look or what you deal with, you never know what baggage or what life experiences another person is dealing with. We have all sorts of different shapes and sizes and lives in our program, and I think it's important to understand the person. And once you understand the person, you can coach them and push them harder, and they know that you understand them and care about them. It makes it easier to push them harder on the football field and have higher expectations. So I think empathy is something that I really learned over, I guess, it would be like the last 2 years. And then also, I'm personally really fortunate because we have a great staff when it
So you
becomes
have,
to being
Thurgood
social.
is still on your staff.
Right, yeah.
He ran for mayor of Rock Island.
Yeah, he
right?
ran for mayor of Rock Island and came up short, and
Dude,
I think he's kind of pondering some other moves. But after him, I mean, we've got 7 or 8 alumni, Anthony Reese, Larry Harris, Nico Watson. They know what it's like to grow up in Rock Island. Dan Nelson's from the Quad Cities. Lance Riccio went to Rock Island. We have guys from the suburbs. So we have a pretty eclectic group. We joke a lot about being able to have a sitcom based on our coaching staff because we have so many crazy personalities. But I'm pretty fortunate to surround myself with those guys.
It's definitely. I feel like you kind of probably have the same type of thoughts that I have when it comes to this of working in an environment like we work in where you deal with such a wide margin of people. It's cool because you kind of start to see that it doesn't matter where you come from. Everyone has the same struggles. Whether you're from a small town in the middle of Illinois, from a farm town, or you're from inner city Chicago, you have a lot of the same struggles. You're dealing with anxiety issues or depression issues or money issues or all of that stuff, and to kind of like be able to separate yourself from that and separate yourself from what the media is saying and all of this divisiveness when you get on Facebook and you get on all of that. I mean, I have conversations with people on a daily basis that if we had that conversation on Facebook, we would not have been able to come to an understanding. It would have gotten ugly. But because you're in person, you can kind of understand that person's perspective and be like, oh, well, this is what they mean by that. And you can, people will say things on the internet that they won't say in person. And having the diversity of clientele that I have and the diversity of a football team, you kind of learn to see things from every perspective, which I think is a very unique thing that not a lot of people have. A lot of people, especially now, they see everything one way. Like, well, I'm offended by that, and so it must be wrong. And it's like we can kind of see. I have people that come in that are offended by certain things, and I can kind of talk to them and understand like what it is, why do you feel that way, and have those tough conversations that your average person, I guess, isn't having.
Right, and I don't necessarily know that everybody has the same problems, but everybody has problems.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's, I guess that's life. I actually walking out of, hopefully he'll watch this, but our chief of security at the high school, we didn't have a great day today of practice, kind of just average, and could have been more on point, and had a couple things go wrong in the school today, and he said, "What's going on, Coach Hammer? How are you?" Mr. Butler, he's our, like I said, our chief of security. And I said, just getting through the day. And he kind of looked at me and could see that I was a little frustrated and said, "Hey, the good days wouldn't be good days if there wasn't for bad days, and you got to appreciate them all." And I think that learning to kind of look at life in a large scope rather than tunnel visioned and necessarily in the now helps a lot with that stuff as well.
Yeah, no, for sure, that definitely. It's always good to be able to kind of put that into perspective too, and understand that, especially in the
Social
position,
media is not real life either.
Well, exactly, but especially when we're in the position, like I've had to kind of check myself on this a lot. I struggle with a lot of mental illness and stuff, and so there's certain days that you wake up and you're really down on yourself, and you're having a bad day, and you're like, oh man, this sucks, and then you have to kind of sit back and realize that like there's people who would kill to be in the position that you're having.
Right.
Like your bad day is a good day for someone else.
Right.
So it's a lot of it is just kind of for me putting everything into perspective and understanding that like, hey, my bad days, yeah, they might suck that day, but in the grand scheme of things, my bad days are still pretty good days, and usually my bad days are technically like I had an hour worth of bad things happen, and I just kind of let that hour affect my entire day instead of just understanding like, hey, that was just a bad moment, and then kind of moving on. You kind of dwell on it and let it affect your whole day.
Well, yeah, and I do a lot of. There's a young coach on our staff that he's a security guard in the school, and I like him because he's high energy and has like grand dreams and wants to achieve and all that stuff. And sometimes he has bad days. When I first met him, he was actually working third shift in a warehouse, I think at Deere, but maybe not. And he'll have bad days all the time, and I'll remind him, and it kind of makes me check myself, like, hey man, 9 months ago, what you're getting to do or what you're calling a bad day was your dream.
Exactly.
You're like living your dream. Or for me, I'll have bad days as the head coach at Rock Island, or good days or whatever, and you got to kind of check yourself and say, hey, 8 years ago, being a head coach was your dream, so excuse my language, get off your ass and get to work and make the best of it.
And I mean, this is something that you and I have kind of talked about. I've been cutting your hair, how long have you been at Rock
Island? 5 years, or 5 seasons almost. It'll be 6 years in the spring. But finding a barber is kind of like finding a girl to date. I had to go through some ugly first dates before we got here.
Yeah, it's
Probably 4 years, 3.5 years.
It's one of the hardest things. I remember when I moved to Nashville, trying to find someone. You're like, I've been going to the same person for 8 years. I don't even have to you don't even have to tell me how you want a haircut. You sit down and I know what you want. Then to have to start that process over, it's definitely it's not a fun process. But in some of like the past conversations and stuff we've had, I know we've kind of talked about. I mean, the barbering industry, football industry, there's kind of an ego attached to it, I guess, in a sense of you almost have to feel like you're the best at what you do or you're not going to be successful. But there's that fine line between believing in yourself and being cocky, and then also believing in yourself, but also still like supporting other people as far as, obviously, anytime you guys play Moline, you want to beat Moline, but when you're not playing Moline, you probably still want to see the coach of Moline successful, and you don't want to see bad things happen. But when that day comes, you want to absolutely destroy him. It's the same concept. Obviously, you want to think you're one of the better barbers. If you don't think that, you're obviously not going to be that. That being said, you have to respect other people in the industry. There's a lot of people around here, a lot of barbers that I have mutual respect for, that if you ask me, are you better than them? I mean, I don't really even like that question, but I do believe that you should put yourself on that level. You should think you're good, and that's not a disrespect thing. It's just you should believe in yourself and you should believe in your abilities. That being said, if I can't get someone in or I'm on vacation or something like that, I have absolutely no problem sending a client to other barbers in this area that I know and I trust. So I guess how do you do that in the football world? Because obviously in the barbering world, it's not a direct competition. It's not like we go up against each other on a daily basis and it's like, hey, who did the best haircut? Where obviously football, Friday nights that decides. So how does that kind of work in the coaching industry and also as a player?
So I think player and coach is a little bit different. I actually think the coach thing kind of mirrors more the barber world from what we've talked about. So you always go into a game expecting to win, right? You make a game plan to win, and if you don't go in expecting to win, you're not going to win. But I think where the respect and the hoping for success comes into play is people who do stuff the right way. So if a guy helps kids get to college, helps them set up to be successful in life, helps them find jobs, helps them move on, helps them become a better husband, brother, son, community member. That's ultimately, to me, like where you're going to earn my respect. Does things with integrity, tells the truth. And so there, just like you said, there's coaches that I respect and like to see do well. Unless they're playing against us, then we do everything we can to win. And then there's other coaches that are kind of self-serving. That to me, if you notice a guy that says me and I a lot in interviews, because no head coach has ever won a game by themselves. It takes great players, takes great assistant coaches, takes administrators, takes student sections, takes parents.
I mean, you got to think even the grounds crew. There's
Right.
so much
Yeah.
involved behind the scenes
Right.
of that.
And so, a guy, to me, you lose immediate credibility with me when watching an interview, and you see a lot of my's and I's instead of we's and us. And then at the same time, also like the integrity piece comes into play. Like, are you in it to help kids be successful and learn and grow? Or are you in it just for wins and losses and like social status or power? That kind of sounds weird to say, but I was always taught the finest form of leadership is servant leadership, and guys who aren't in it to help the kids that they coach are guys that I don't respect as much, and guys that are in it for their players, for their kids, for their communities, and their assistant coaches. They do it the right way.
I guess that kind of leads into another question I had for you as far as a high school football coach, what is your, like, if you had to write down, I guess, what you think a high school coach should be doing, as far as, like, obviously you're only going to have a handful of players, maybe even in your career, that go to a D1 level and have the opportunity to go pro.
Right.
So obviously, a lot of these kids are just, you're teaching them football just because they're looking for something to do, that type of thing. And I know, obviously, because I've had conversations with you about it before, that you look at things more of from a life perspective, is
Right.
trying to make these like better kids.
So you're asking like, how do you know that you were successful?
Or I guess, and how do you balance that of, I want to win football games, and obviously, especially if you're looking to advance yourself in your career. Like, for instance, I played football for 1 year, not built for football, but the coach I had, it was in junior high, and you could tell that he had aspirations to be more than a junior high coach, which is cool, but he treated us not like junior hires. He treated us like high schoolers. Like, I had never put a football helmet on before, and I'm getting screamed at by this dude like I'm a high schooler,
Right.
I should know what I'm doing. So it's like, obviously, you have to start at the bottom. If you want to be a football coach, you got to probably start at the high school level and work your way up. But how do you kind of do that, but have the ultimate goal of making better kids and not just football players?
So I think it's a little bit of a myth that you can't do both those things at the same time. So we're always going to work to win. We're always going to have super high expectations. We're always going to practice hard, work hard, prepare hard. But at the same time, like, you're teaching life lessons at the same time that you're yelling at a kid to run faster. I mean, I can't tell you when the stuff hits the fan and life gets hard that I don't think of my high school coach and the hardest drill we used to ever do. And all my high school buddies will see it. He used to call it triangle pursuit, where I don't think of triangle pursuit when life gets hard for me and it helps get you through. Like, hey, if I can do that, I can do this type of deal. So I think those things can go hand in hand. And when you talk about advancing or moving up the career path or having aspirations, I think that's okay too, because the way that you achieve those aspirations at any level, whether it's being a Little Rocks coach and then getting on as a paid coach at the junior high and then moving to high school and becoming a varsity assistant coach, which we, in our program, we've had 4 or 5 guys that have done that are tremendous coaches that care about kids. Like, the kids are ultimately your resume, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you can teach a kid who can't really walk and chew bubble gum at the same time to run a football or read a defense, to me that's just as impressive or more impressive than teaching the great athlete to be an All-American.
Yeah.
And people at higher levels notice that, I believe.
How does it work for you as far as like, especially in today's society, like you're starting to see all of these things going around in school where kids have less respect for authority than ever, it seems like, as far as the disrespect I've seen towards teachers on all of this stuff. As a football coach, how do you handle that specifically? How do you handle it if, say, you've got a star football player and he's acting out? How do you handle that? Because obviously there's some coaches that let that stuff slide, and that's how you get the prima donnas
Right.
of the football teams, because they've been doing that since they were in high school and they let it slide, where it's like, hey, that dude's good enough, he can do whatever he wants and he's still going to play. But obviously then you end up heading towards the college level and all that type of stuff, and that doesn't fly. So how do you kind of balance? Obviously you want to win, but your ultimate goal is to make these better kids instead of just winning football.
Right. So as long as your expectations are clear, most kids, although they would never say it or admit it, discipline is good for them, and they're all right with that. And I'm not going to stand here and pretend like I'm Bobby Knight or something of the football world, because I like to think that I am more of a player's coach and have relationships with our guys, and they have fun and like me. But our few expectations, they know what our expectations are, and if you can't meet those, there are reminders or there's consequences for it. We don't walk on the big rectangle that's the practice field, and if kids can't understand that, then we will do some reminders or some running. We don't take our helmet off in the big rectangle, and when I say the big rectangle, that's the whole football field.
Okay.
If they need water, they've got to get outside the lines, and they know that's what the expectation is. As far as in the school, first I will say that all that stuff that was on TikTok and all that stuff was wild, and really tough to deal with as an educator, just stepping away from the coaching football aspect of it. But whether positive or negative, we talk to our kids a lot, and I think this can be applied to any student, any extracurricular activity, any sport. That leaders are leaders no matter what. There's good leaders and there's negative leaders. When you say the word leadership, it comes with a positive connotation. But you can be doing everything right, preaching the right thing, being like a second coach, and if nobody's following you, you're not leading, you're just taking a walk. Whereas you're participating in those TikTok challenges where you destroy the property or whatever, you're hanging around the wrong crowd, doing the wrong things, and other people are following you, well, you're leading. And we talk to our kids a lot about recognizing that, and in sports or extracurricular activities, there's a lot of positions that you're a leader no matter what. People are going to follow you. If you're the shortstop, you're the point guard, you're the quarterback, the middle linebacker, the lead in the play, people are going to follow you no matter what. So I think that puts a little bit of added responsibility on those kids, because the majority of kids are going to be in the middle, and wherever your leaders take you is where your team is going to go.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about, we have our program philosophies, our program principles, but the leadership of a team from year to year, like the team is the 1 year existence and the program is over the span of a long time. The 1 year team deal, that's kind of on the leaders of your team to establish that culture.
So I guess kind of playing off the leadership and all that type of thing, I kind of have when it comes to me for hiring people, I kind of have a mindset, and I'm curious to see if it's the same for you as the football. When I'm looking for people to hire, I would much rather hire someone who is a good person that I have to work with a little bit, like they leave a line in a ball fade type of thing. I would much rather teach that person how to take the line out of the ball fade if they're a good person than to find a barber who is phenomenal but an absolute asshole and I have to work on a personality. I'm not going to hire that person. Where if you have the personality and you're willing to learn,
Right.
I'm going to bring you in a heartbeat. Is that kind of how it works for a football team too? Obviously,
I would say
you want skill,
Yeah.
but I feel like attitude same thing with a barbershop. Like, you obviously have to be able to do a haircut, but if it's some minor tweaks here and there, like, hey, I can teach you how to, in a week I can teach you how to fix that type of thing, I'm going to be a lot more willing to hire that person than I necessarily would be if it was, like I said, someone that they're the absolute best barber. They can do all this stuff, but they're disrespectful to their clients. They don't show up on time. They have poor attitude. All of that type of stuff plays a huge factor, and I feel like a lot of people just kind of focus on the talent aspect and they don't focus on the personality aspect.
So I kind of think it's both. I would lean more the same way that you're talking about with barbers. But at the same time, I also think it's kind of a crazy misconception in all areas of life that it's impossible to coach or teach character, right? I think that especially if you've got culture established, and again, we're constantly working on what we do in Rock Island in our program. But I think that if a kid or a coach for that matter is, say you've got the quarterback whisperer, and every quarterback, he knows how to teach the reads, he knows how to teach the technique, the throws, but you like you said, he's not the greatest person. I think through influence and coaching your coaches or coaching your barbers, you can help teach guys like the importance of being on time, the importance of putting other people before yourself. So I agree with you, and I think I lean more that way. But I think that you can also coach character the same way that you do kids.
I feel like especially on a football team, that's
Right.
a lot easier than, in a barbershop especially, I'm kind of the mindset of like, you're teaching high schoolers. I'm working with grown-ass
Right.
men. Like, if you're 30 years old and you are still dealing with these issues, I'm not a therapist.
Right.
But from a football standpoint, that definitely makes sense. But
Well, and even coaches from a football standpoint, they're grown men too, and sometimes you'll get a guy who understands how to play the position or understands the angles and the technique, but struggles with being on time or struggles with doing their prep work. Although much more difficult, I think it's possible to teach those things.
so, I guess something that's like unrelated to football. How would you, as someone who deals with this generation on a daily basis, obviously when you turn on the news or you listen to any older generation, they always talk about how this generation's destroying everything and all of this stuff. As someone who deals with it on a daily basis, like, what is kind of your advice, not to this generation, to the other people who don't necessarily understand, to try to kind of bridge that gap so that people can kind of understand that, like, there's just a difference of mindset is really all that it is. These kids coming up have a different mindset, and it's not necessarily bad, it's just different than what people were used to growing up.
So the biggest thing from what I've experienced is that social media didn't exist when we were little kids. These guys have never known.
God,
Right, absolutely. These kids have never known a world without Facebook. These kids weren't alive. A lot of the kids that I'm teaching now, they weren't alive 9/11. They definitely weren't alive in the 80s. I think that the advice that I would give is that a lot of older generations would talk about work ethic and soft and things like that, but it's a completely different world that kids these days are experiencing as far as social pressures and the way that the economy works and how difficult it is to get a job or own a house.
I
Like,
mean, especially even high school now. Like, when I was in school, I never dealt with bullying. Like, I mean, people would like talk shit type of thing, but I was
Right.
pretty quick-witted, so like I never experienced bullying. But now kids who experience bullying, it's not just at school. Where
It never
when
leaves.
kids
You
got
can't turn
bullied-
it off.
yeah, when I was growing up, when kids got bullied, they got bullied at school. They went home, and that was it. Like, it sucked, obviously, but now
Right.
they open up Facebook, people are saying stuff. They open up Twitter, people are saying stuff. Snapchat. So that's the thing people don't understand. Like, everyone's like, oh, these kids are so sensitive and they're so soft, and it's like, these kids have shit being talked to about them nonstop.
Yeah.
I mean,
Something like right on this topic that blows my mind to see, and they're ruthless, especially in the Quad Cities, man. A lot of our athletes in any sport, not just football, they're treated almost like professional athletes when it comes to social media. They've got to read about completely grown people talking about the bad tackle that they missed, or the three-pointer that they missed, or the serve that they've missed, and
I was actually just having
the high school barstool accounts and that type of I guess it would be like social media bullying. It gets pretty intense. Kids are forced to grow up quick, and sometimes I think that's why you see kids go in shells, or kids struggle with anxiety, or struggle with performance, and that's tough stuff to deal with. It's definitely not in the Quad Cities. Once you get to the varsity level, it's not just playing a game for fun anymore. You're representing your town and your community and your school and your family.
Well, and especially at a high school level, it's so insane to me that I'll be honest, I get really annoyed when I've never like attacked anyone's personal character or anything like that, but there's been a couple times this year that like, if someone on Iowa had a horrible game or something, you'll be like, oh, this person had a bad game, and you'll get those people that comment that like, you shouldn't say anything, these are kids, and from a high school standpoint, I understand it. College, I feel like, especially now that NIL is a thing, I feel like it's, I mean,
Part of their responsibility to play well.
I don't feel like you should say anything nasty. Like, the nasty, derogatory stuff is absolutely unacceptable, but like, if someone throws an interception, you should be able to be like, dude, what was that? Like, but the problem is just that people just take it too far, obviously, and I think that's kind of why people have said you can't do that. But some of these dudes in college are like 22 years old, and they're like, I saw it the other day. The thing that kind of brought it up was that Iowa-Penn State game. There was a lot of Penn State injuries where someone would go down and it would look like they got shot, and then 2 plays later they're back in the game. And so a couple of times when they went down, some Iowa fans booed, and I saw people on Twitter like, you're booing these children. It's like, okay, these are not children.
Right.
You want to talk basketball, Jordan Bohannon's like 24 years old. He's like 6 years into school. Like, that's a grown man.
Right.
So, but that is an aspect of it that's difficult. Like, I was just talking with one of my best
Where do
friends.
you draw that line? Like, yes,
Exactly.
Jordan Bohannon's 26, but at the same time, there's plenty of people on that court, on that floor that are 19.
Exactly.
18.
So it's trying to find that line of being critical of someone, but not overstepping that line. And unfortunately, on the internet, people don't have that. I was actually just having a conversation with one of my best friends about that, and his son doesn't play sports or anything, but he's super artistic, and he's trying to encourage it, and he wants him to kind of like put some artwork out there and stuff. But the problem is that people are so mean,
Right.
you can't do it. So what we're talking about is he's essentially going to make like a fake account. That way people don't know who it is, and they can't personally attack you, because
Right.
it's just like anything. I guarantee you that someone will see this video on YouTube and dislike it, or someone will leave a comment somewhere, or not even necessarily say anything to either one of us, but they'll make a comment to someone else. And it's just like, there's nothing that you can do in life now without having some negative feedback. It just
Right.
is what it is. That's, anytime you're doing anything, people are going to talk. Some of it's going to be positive, and some of it's going to be negative. So it's, for me, it's always trying to prepare kids for that, but also shelter them from the awful stuff. Like,
Right.
you need to know, like, I don't feel like it's necessarily, especially at a college level, it's not a bad thing to understand that, like, hey, I had a bad game. But you don't need to be going on there saying, like, some of the stuff I've seen is just absolutely awful that they're saying to these athletes.
Right. Having a bad game, or people talking about you having a bad game, and people telling you should go do something horrible, or you don't deserve to live. Those are 2 pretty different extremes to me, and people don't understand some of that stuff. I do believe that there's a certain aspect to, if you buy a ticket or watch a game, like, you deserve to have an opinion. But attacking somebody's personal life and things like that that's a little bit much to me.
I am always a fan of, for me, example, critique my work.
Right.
If you don't like my haircut, cool, that is fair game. Like, this is what I've spent my life crafting, my work. Critique that. If you have an issue with my personality or something like that, I feel like it's a much different way that you need to go about that. You need to
Right.
approach me on a one-on-one situation instead of saying something in a public forum, I guess. But unfortunately, most people don't have the tact to do that anymore. But I mean, I guess kind of getting close to wrapping it up. What's I'll show you the cut too. But what's something that, like,
I guess from your perspective of like a lot of jobs, when you kind of tell people what you do, there's like a preconceived notion. Like when I tell someone I'm a barber, your mind always kind of goes to one place. What's something that you feel like as a football coach, you're either like misinterpreted as or misjudged as, or that people don't necessarily understand about the job that you kind of wish people understood?
Well, and I think people understand this. They just don't always act like they understand it. And I will definitely start by saying I'm about as stereotypical of a football coach as they come. Like, I like to work. I like my job. I put in a lot of hours. What's good?
That's a good.
Yeah. I put in a lot of hours. I like the game. I like being around the kids. I like teaching. So I will start by saying that I'm pretty stereotypical when it comes to that. But one thing, and I actually went to all PE this year, that always drove me insane is that people say coaches don't teach, whether that's basketball, football, whatever, girls soccer. That's a really bad rap that coaches get in the teaching industry.
Yeah.
And coaching literally is teaching. And most of the time, now some will ignore some responsibilities or whatever. I guess I've seen that. But most of the time, a real good coach is also a real good teacher.
I mean, think about how many professional athletes that you talk to that they equate their basketball coach or their football coach or whatever coach as like a father figure that
Right.
shaped their life. Because a lot of these guys coming up might not have that father figure where their basketball coach or their football coach or whoever can kind of step in and show them what it's like to be an adult. And I'm sure that you've had people that you've kind of had to show them stuff. Like, I don't know if you've ever had to, but like there's simple things that tying a tie, simple things like that that people don't know how to do, that as a coach you can kind of step in. Like if
Yeah.
you're getting ready for a big game and you see a kid sitting there struggling, you can walk over, and it's simple things like that that's a life lesson that that kid's going to know for the rest of his life that goes well beyond football.
Right, yeah. I mean, we tied plenty of ties and help kids and teach kids life lessons. But I wasn't even saying that. I was saying, like, English teachers thinking that because I'm a football coach, I can't teach social studies.
The same type of concept of
Right.
where if you get a degree and you play football, you didn't actually
Right,
get
get a degree.
They gave it to you.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely can run into people really, really hard with a lot of force, but just because you play football doesn't mean you're a big dumb idiot.
Well, I mean, I look at someone like Andrew Luck.
Right.
Dude's like an engineer, one of the best engineers in the world now. You have so many players that either could have gone to Harvard or Stanford or wherever, but because of athletics chose to go to a different type of school. But I feel like that is a huge misconception with football, is that if you're a football player, you're
Big dumb
big.
jock.
I mean, same example. Miles Garrett. I'm pretty sure he's talked about how he's into anime and all of this stuff. Shit, James Daniels, center for the Bears. I don't think he plays center anymore, but offensive lineman for the Bears. I cut his hair when he played for Iowa. He would send me Snapchats back in the day of him listening to like Taylor Swift and watching this stuff, and it's like 6'5", 300-pound dude. You would not expect that,
Right.
but that's just, and so it's definitely a very stereotypical thing. I feel like when it comes to football, people kind of put you into a box that I don't feel like is necessarily fair.
Right.
I mean, so I guess to finish it off, obviously, like if anyone's kind of curious to follow along with whether it's Rock Island football or just kind of your journey, where's a place people can kind of follow and see what's going on?
So I don't really do a whole lot of Facebook or Instagram, a little bit of Instagram, but you can follow Rock Island, everything going on Rock Island athletics, really, and then just football world, USA football, and then myself at Coach_Hammer on Twitter. That's probably the social media I'm most active on. As I get older, though, I've kind of gotten less and less into social media.
Dude, it changes so much.
Yeah.
Like if you don't go on it for 2 weeks, you don't remember how to do anything anymore. I guess for anyone who's watching this, that's a high school football player type of thing. What is, especially someone, because obviously you went to college to play football, what is your biggest advice for someone if you're watching this and you're like, man, I want to play at the college level? What is kind of the biggest advice or the biggest lesson that you learned that you kind of wish you would have known before you went to school?
He's been under a lot of heat lately, but it's something that I learned from Brett Bielema, who's at Illinois now. This is from when he was at Arkansas, though. One of his things, he talks about stacking days, and I think that's a great concept because not all days are going to be good, not all days are going to be bad. Some days are medium, but if every day, if you want to achieve something, if you work a little bit to be a little bit better, well, then the next day you'll have a good day maybe and get quite a bit better, then an excellent day, then a bad day. Well, no matter what, as long as you're working towards your craft, you're stacking those days and stacking that percent.
Like that saying, like get 1% better
Right.
each day.
And in 100 days, you're twice as good.
Well, I appreciate you coming through, and good luck on the rest of the season. I'm sure you guys got what, a couple.
Quincy Friday, and then
Friday.
the playoffs the week after that.
Well, good luck on the rest of the season, man. I appreciate you coming through.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.